I'm Patty Snow, and this is Purple Politics with Patty. One of my key platforms is on government reformation. And yes, it does have somewhat to do with corruption, and I'll talk about that in a second. But a big portion of it is, our government was set up by our founders who did a fabulous job. I always marvel that this little tiny document has kept us going for 250 years. But this is a different world than it was 250 years ago. And it's time we bring our government into the 21st century. So, in order to do that, I think there's some things that are going to require constitutional amendment. First of all, I think it's time that we put term limits in place for Congress. And, when I say that, a lot of people are very excited about that, but they're also cautious because they know that it takes time for a representative or a senator to really learn the ropes and to get those prestigious appointments in committees where they can really have an effect. But I'm not talking about just two-term limits like we have for our president. I'm talking about 4 term limits for both the Senate and for the House. And that would mean senators would have 24 years to get the job done. Representatives would have 8 years. And I'm sorry, if you can't get something done in 24 years, you're in the wrong job. So it's important that we pass the baton on to the next generation because they are the ones that are most fluent in the new technology. They are ones that are living in the society that these laws are affecting. And so we need to have that young blood coming in, and we need to have turnover. You talked about corruption. Well, right now, with PACs and with the influence of super PACs, which I'm going to get to in a second, they pour so much money into getting officials elected who they know will support their agenda that they are more concerned with taking that money and getting reelected than they are about doing what's necessary for the people in their district. So I think it's time we set the term limits, let them get in, let them focus on doing what's right for their district, and then they can move on and pass the baton. So that's one thing. I also think it's time we need a constitutional amendment to have reformation of the Supreme Court. I've never been a big fan of the lifelong term, but when we see what's going on right now, I think it becomes clear why that's so dangerous. With Supreme Court justices being nominated by the president, when we get someone who is a little fanatical, does that sound familiar? And they're nominating justices, they're going to bring justices onto the bench who represent their ideology. And if that justice is there for life, that could be decades that they're carrying those beliefs and they are interpreting the law of the Constitution according to those beliefs, even long after that president is gone. So I think we need to have term limits for the Supreme Court. I also think that we need to extend the number of justices on the court because right now we have 9 justices. The country has grown. I think we need to have at least 13 so we have a broader representation of our country. And I also think that we need to change the way our Supreme Court justices are nominated. Again, we need to cut those political ties as much as possible. So that's 2 things. Let's talk about dark money. It's a term we've all heard, but not everyone knows what it refers to. So back in 2010, there was a lawsuit brought on by Citizens United, and it went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court actually voted 5-4 in favor of Citizens United. And basically what that decision meant is that corporations, big businesses, have the same constitutional rights as individual Americans. That sounds like it would be okay, but the big problem is that opened up the floodgates for what we now call dark money. When you and I want to donate to someone's campaign, we're given a limit. We can only donate $3,500 for the primary and for the general election. That's the max. And if you've ever donated, you know you have to give your name, your address, if you're employed, and if so, by whom. Well, with the dark money, with super PACs, they don't have any of those restrictions. They can take as much money as they want, billions of dollars from a single person, and they don't have to disclose who that person was. The only restriction, well, there are two. They can't take foreign money, and they can't give the money directly to the candidate. In other words, they can't write a check for $6 billion and give it to the candidate. But what they can do is they can pay for all of the advertising for that candidate. So if they get someone, I'm just going to throw a name out there, like Cliff Bentz, who they know will represent the rights of logging companies. That logging company is going to want to make sure that Cliff gets reelected. So they're going to pour lots of money into advertisements to get him reelected so he will serve them. And at the same time, they can pour lots of money into advertisements going against his opponent, making them look bad. So we have a lot of people in Congress who take that dark money because they know that will help get them reelected. But that's why the Elon Musks of the world and the Jeff Bezos of the world, they have more control over our government now than you or I. So let's go to the next step of that. We have to get that dark money out. We need to have that ruling overturned, or we at least need to amend it so that there are greater restrictions. And if super PACs want to represent someone, they have to have a limit of how much they can donate or spend, and they have to divulge who the donators are. Okay, now let's take the next step. We need to make sure that our vote counts as much as those rich people. That's why I think it's time to get rid of the Electoral College. Again, it made sense at the time that our Constitution was ratified, but it doesn't make sense now. You and I should know that our vote counts as much as anyone else's, regardless of how much money they make. And it makes our elected officials pay just as much attention to us as they do to those donors. So time to get rid of the Electoral College. So we've put term limits in for Congress, we've reformed the Supreme Court, we have gotten rid of dark money, and we have given your vote more power. That's a lot of change for our government, but I think it's going in the right direction at that point because it's refocusing on the people instead of the wealthy and the big businesses. So now let's talk about the last thing. The last thing is ethics. We have to start making our elected officials and the people they assign to cabinet positions accountable for their actions. In 2024, the Supreme Court passed another judgment that I do not agree with. And that is, they gave the President of the United States absolute immunity for actions that they take while in office. I'm sorry. This is the highest position in the land. They swear an oath to uphold the Constitution and the laws of our land. And yet, we are saying that if they don't adhere to those laws, as a matter of fact, if they deliberately break those laws and go against the Constitution, we're not going to do anything about it. We have seen what that has done to our country this year. So we need a strong ethics committee, almost as if it's the fourth branch of our government, who will police those people that we have put our trust in, our elected officials, and make sure that they are abiding by the laws the same way that we need to abide by the laws. Think of these 5 points with government reformation. Term limits for Congress. Term limits for the Supreme Court and reforming the number of justices on the bench and how they're nominated. Getting dark money out of our government by either amending the Citizens United against the United States or overturning it. Dismantling the Electoral College and going to one person, one vote, and strengthening our ethics committee so that our elected officials are held accountable for their actions. But I can't get to Washington on my own. I need your support. So if the things you've heard resonate with you, if you'd like to see me fighting for your rights, then I would appreciate your support, both in the primary and in the general election. Thank you so much.